Hello viewers, good evening. Welcome to my channel, The Learning Destination. And today I am going to cover the topic Kubernetes services. This course has been especially designed for the viewers, those have already the Kubernetes basic or the fundamental ideas. However, for those candidate doesn't know how to set up the Kubernetes clusters, they can visit the link which is mentioned in the comment sections and they can set up the Kubernetes cluster. After that, they can perform these all tasks. Let's deal with the first slide. So here I have shown three nodes, node 1, node 2 and node 3. So let's assume node 1 is serving as the front-end application. However, node 2 and node 3 is serving as the back-end application. If you have the basic idea of the pod, then pod works on some networks like the Flannel or the Calico or the Wave network. Now each network has different series of IP address, and it might be possible that your node is not in the same network. So in such scenario, you cannot access your applications, or the end users cannot access the applications from the outside. Internally, it can be accessible. For that, we create the services in Kubernetes. Even though whenever you have the front-end applications and below that the back-end applications, you can create services from your back-end services to your front-end applications, so the end users can access your applications. Now in the next slide, we will see the architecture of the pod. So here in the right hand side, there is one node which IP is 192.168.56.40, and there is a pod which is running on the Flannel network 10.244.0.2. So if we host any application inside the pod, obviously since the node network is in different series, the end users cannot access this application. And to mitigate this kind of situations, to access these applications, that's how we deploy the services inside the Kubernetes. There are three types of Kubernetes services. First is node pod, then the cluster IP, and the third one is load balancer. So firstly, we will see the node pod, and I am going to cover the first node pod services. In node pod services, this is the node, and you see that there is a pod network, one pod, which is running on 10.244.0.2. So inside pod, if we host any applications, which I am exposing on port 80, which is called the target port. Then again, when we create the services, the Kubernetes gives these clusters to some IP range, which is also exposing on some port. Let's suppose it is 80, which is called the pod. And the third one is that there is node port, which is running on, here I am giving 30,009. The node port has always some certain range. Whenever you assign range, you should have to assign between those range that is running from 30,000 to 32,767. If you see on my right hand side, there is a service definition file. There I have mentioned API version. So for any definition file in Kubernetes, there are four sections are very important. That is API version, kind, metadata, and spec. So if you see, the kind is the service, which is going to be create the services. As you know that inside the Kubernetes, whenever you deploy any services, you have to define the kind, and according based on that, it creates those kind of services. Let's say if I am going to create the pod, I need to define the pod in the kind sections, right? So it will create the pod for me. So same here, I have mentioned the services, then I have given the name, my app services, and then the type is node port. If I am going to create the cluster, then I have to give here the cluster IP, or if the type is I am going to create the load balancer services, then type should be here the node port services. Then there is a target port. This is the target port, okay, 80, which is the port you should mention as like the target port. Then the services port you should mention with the port, that is this one, and the final, the node port on which you are going to access your applications, this is this one. So here I have defined it that 30,009. However, I have already created this YAML file, and that's why the previously I have already mentioned the 8. Never mind. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so before going to this slide, I'm telling you that okay, when you create the services, you have given everything, but if you see that there is missing the pod, because this service will be created, but how it can be know that on what application it should access, right? Or we are going to create the services for which applications. That's why we have to run some pod. So this is the pod definition file, and through this with the help of this I am going to create one pod. However, on the right hand side there is a services YAML file. So if you see in services, I have mentioned the selector. Selector, it means that it calls the same pod. Okay, it calls the same pod which is running with this. So on my left hand side, if you see that this is the simple definition file of the pod, which is running by the name of my app hyphen pod. So if you see the difference between the pod definition file and the services definition file, I have taken this label and I have added as like the selector in services definition file. So whenever we create this services, it calls this applications, so we can access these applications through node port. Okay, now there is types of services, which is, as I have already previously explained, like there are three types of services: node port, cluster, and load balancer. So today I am covering the node port services, and later on I will cover cluster and load balancer services as well. Okay, so till now we have already seen quite theoretical, and we should go through some practical examinations. Okay, so this is my master node. Okay, if we see currently running service pods, there is two. I have already previously created the pod which is running right now. Let's check the services. Okay, so we have one already services running. Let me delete it. Now let's again check services. Okay, so there are no. Okay guys, so until now I have successfully created my pod, which we can check here. Okay, the name myf-pod, because I have already defined it in my YAML file, in my pod definition file, which is this. So we can check here. So you can see the name is myapp-pod. So my pod name is myapp-pod. Now I am going to create the services, and for that I have already created one service definition file. Let's quickly go through it and check some valuable informations. Like the name, I have mentioned my app hyphen services. In the same way as I previously explained, like whenever you want to tie your pod with this services, you have to call that labels inside the selector. So if you see my pod.yaml file, there is, I have defined the labels, and the same labels I have called here under the selector. So let's create the service. So my service is successfully created. Let's list the service. So you can see that my service is successfully created. So according to the theory, now whatever the application inside my pod, I should be accessed internally. That means from this machine as well as from the browser, that the end users can access my application. So let's first access these applications from internally. Okay, but before that we need to access, as I explained you here, that we need to access on this node port. Okay, this node port service with the IP address of this node machine. Okay, so in such cases my application is hosted. Let's see that where my this Kubernetes cluster is assigned which node to my pod, so that we can check it. kubectl get pod -o white. So my app pod, it assigned to the node worker02, and since this is my virtual machine and I have given the static IP, it's this machine worker02 node IP is curl http://192.168.56.40, and the port number. Something I did wrong. 156. Okay, I have given here the wrong port number. It's 30,009. Okay, so you can see that the applications is successfully accessible, and I can see my Nginx welcome page. Why Nginx welcome page? Because inside that pod I have given the Nginx container name. You see, inside my pod definition name, I have given the Nginx web server name. That's why I'm able to access it my default Nginx page. Okay, now access the same applications from the outside. That means if I try to access from this browser, I should be able to access it. Okay, so here we see that we are able to successfully access that application which is currently running inside the pod from the browser. That means that the applications running inside the pod, the end users are successfully able to access it from the browser. Okay guys, so now till now what we have seen is that the single pod running on the single node, and that's how we have created the services. But what will happen, let's suppose that when you have the multiple pods, let's come to this slide. Okay, so if you see on the currently on the slide, so this is the single node. However, there is a multiple node. In previous slide we have seen that there was the single node and the single pod. What happens when you have the single node and multiple pod? Guys, there won't be anything changed, because the principle will be the same and the services will work on the same principles. Even though we have the multiple pods, they all are combined with the labels, and we are able to access the application through the node IP. Okay, now in this right hand side, if you see, now there is a multiple node. Now there is a multiple node with the multiple pod. So each node in the current slide, I have given the each node having one pod. So inside that the application is running. If even though in such kind of cases also the principle will be the same, and you are able to access the applications using the using the node IP with the port number. Okay, so I think that's it for this lecture, guys. I think your understanding with the Kubernetes services is pretty much good now, and if you have any questions, then you can just put the comment and I will be answered as soon as possible. And if you like this video, then please share this video, comment, like it, and yes, don't forget to subscribe my channel. Thank you so much.